Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today is a very exciting video because it is the July wrap-up. So these are going to be all the books that I have read in the month of July, and also the books I read in my reading rush, which are the books I read in July. And I will just be talking about them, giving you my rating, my review, what I thought about them, and I'm very excited. I read some good books this month and a lot of books. So I will be having my Goodreads up on my phone and we're just gonna go through it. So let's see what we read this month. Okay, the first book that I read this month is Say Nothing, and I will be popping the image up because I actually borrowed this book from someone, so I don't have it anymore. But this book revolves around a judge and his family. He has what would be considered the perfect cookie cutter life. You know, he has a great job that he loves and enjoys working for. He's a judge, obviously, and he really enjoys it. He has a loving wife and a great relationship with her. And he has two beautiful children, two twins, one boy, one girl. So everything seems to be going great in his life until one day he receives a call and his children have been taken. They are gone and they are being held hostage, and they basically said, do as we tell you and your children won't get harmed. We'll return them to you, but you have to do exactly what we say. Basically where it goes from there. I won't give too many details. This book, I will say, has a lot of twists and turns. It's pretty exciting in that regard because things are always changing. You know how some books have like a plot twist at the end? This book has little plot twists throughout the entire book, which really keeps you engaged and wanting to keep reading because you're like, whoa, I was not expecting that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's how it feels, just like that. So I did really enjoy it. This book actually got me out of a reading slump, so that was great. I really contribute this book to getting me out of a reading slump just because of how many twists and turns were in it, and the chapters were very, very short, which also helped because I love when there are short chapters because it also makes you want to keep reading. I did end up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars, and the reason for that is because some of the characters kind of annoyed me a little bit, and I didn't necessarily agree with the choices that they made. It just made me want to scream through the book at them, and it made me really annoyed. And I'm a very character-driven person in books. If I don't like the character, I won't really be able to connect to the story, and it's not as impactful. So that's the only reason why, but I may change my rating. I don't know. That's another thing about me is that it's hard for me to rate my books right after I read them. I need to sit on it for a little bit and really think about the book, and if it sticks with me, then it'll be a higher rating. But you don't know if a book is going to stick with you right away, you know? So we'll see if the rating changes in the future, but for right now, it's 3-star. And for me, a 3-star book is a good book. That means it's good, I enjoyed it. 4 stars, great, amazing. 5-star is life-changing, you know? So it's kind of how I rate my books, and this one was a 3-star just because of that aspect. I was kind of annoyed with some of the choices they were making, but again, you know, you never know what's going to happen. If you were put in that situation, how am I to say how I would have reacted if my children were taken? That's kind of the whole point. It's how would you react? You may think that you would react in a certain way, but if it actually were to happen to you and you were faced with those decisions, what would you do? So I think that if the book sounds interesting to you at all, you should pick it up because you may actually really like it, and I think it's just an interesting read. So if it sounds interesting to you, try to pick it up. It may be good as an audiobook. I don't know if it's available, but I just read it. But I thought it was a really cool read, so I did enjoy it. 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was Demon Slayer 1. So I did talk about this book a little bit. Oh, wrong side. I did talk about this a little bit. I did watch the anime, which made me want to pick this up because the anime was really good. But actually the first book, or the first manga, is exactly what I saw in the anime. So I read through it really fast because I already knew what was going on, which makes me really, really, really want to read the next one because I really enjoyed it and it kind of left on a cliffhanger. So it was a really great manga. It was the first manga I've ever read, and I really liked the illustrations, how he does it. So I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. That's the whole reason why I wanted to read it in the first place. It was just as good as the show. I cannot wait to read the second one. I will be reading it in the month of August, so I can't wait to get into this book. It was great. highly recommend. So this follows a young boy who sells charcoal, I believe, and he leaves one day, basically comes back to find his whole family has been murdered by what he believes to be a demon, but his younger sister is still alive. So he's trying to get her help and to save her life when he finds out that she herself has turned into a demon, but she's like a good demon. So they don't really know why, but she doesn't seem to be attacking humans and she's very kind. So he goes out to try to find help for her, to try to figure out what happened and kind of avenge his family that has been killed by demons. So that's the story without giving anything away. That happens right in the beginning, and the rest is just a really interesting story. And if you don't even want to read the manga, I recommend watching the anime because it was still really good and it's quick episodes, and I'm telling you, the story just pulls you along. So if that interests you, check this out because I highly recommend this one. Okay, moving right along. The next book that I read is A Darker Shade of Magic. I'm going to pop the image up because I'm actually lending this book to my sister, so she's going to read it. So I don't have it. Actually, I have like the dust cover somewhere, but this is the first book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. This is my first book. This was part of my reading rush, and this checked off the prompt to read a book that takes place in a different continent. I think that was what it is. Basically somewhere where I don't live, and I don't live in London, so that's where the book takes place. It follows a character named Kel. He's actually able to travel between multiple parallel universes. So there is Grey London, which is the London that we know. Then there is Red London, which is where Kel lives, and that is the London based in magic. And then there's White London, which also has magic in it, but the magic is kind of like overtaking. There's an imbalance of power basically, and they have some leaders that are more corrupt. So Kel is one of the only two people that can travel in between the different parallel universes. So in his London, he lives with the royals, and he's treated like royalty and able to send different correspondence between the different Londons, if that makes sense. And throughout one of his travels, he gets caught up in something that gets him in a little bit of trouble. So you kind of follow along his journey. It was an amazing book. I truly loved it. It has been sitting on my shelf for the longest time, and I never picked it up. So I'm so excited that this reading rush finally got me to read it because I absolutely loved it. It is not a YA fantasy. It is an adult fantasy, which I can appreciate because I like YA books, but sometimes I just feel like I want to read an adult book, you know? So I really loved it. The world building is great. It was like an easy, I feel like it was a good fantasy for me to start with because I don't read a lot of fantasies, so I feel like this was a good one to start with just because I still could kind of understand the world because I can imagine London, and I can just imagine a London with magic in it, you know, better than just like a completely different world. So if you're looking for a good book to start off fantasy with, I would suggest this book because I think it was a good, easy world to kind of comprehend and build. It was full of adventure, intrigue, deception. I mean, it just had everything you need. A good couple twists and turns in it. I'm really excited to keep reading it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I didn't really know what to expect, and it exceeded my expectations. I loved it. So I'm really looking forward to reading the next one, which hopefully I will be reading in the month of August. The next book I read was also part of the reading rush, and it's actually a graphic novel, and it is called Sheets. Here it is. It is beautiful. It's a cute little graphic novel, and it follows a young girl who owns a laundromat that used to be her mom's, but her mom has actually passed away, and she's now in charge of the laundromat. And it kind of shows her story and the grief. You know, her dad is still grieving the loss of the mom, so she's really in charge of everything at the laundromat. Meanwhile, she's still going to school, and it's kind of hard for her to handle that. I mean, as you can imagine, as a young girl who's still in school. I think she's only 13. She's in middle school, okay? Yeah. So it's kind of hard for her to balance both of those, and their company is kind of struggling. And in the meantime, she meets a little ghost, which is so cute. And it says one of the things she hates is ghosts. So kind of is a cute little story on their friendship. Sheets is a powerful story about a young girl's perseverance, even when all odds are stacked against her. It shows that forgiveness and second chances can result in unlikely friendships. Above all, it's an invitation to an unusual haunted laundromat that brings family, friends, and yes, sheets to life. So it was a really adorable read. I think it would even be nice to read like during Halloweenish kind of vibes, just because it has to do with ghosts, and the pictures are really beautiful. It has some very nice like fallish type illustrations, so I think that this would have been a nice read to have a cute, friendly, spooky read. I give it a 4.5, just because it was cute, quick read, and the illustrations were very beautiful if you like colorized illustrations like this. The next book that I read as part of the reading rush was The Hate You Give. This book hit the prompts of read a book with my birthstone, read a book with that starts with the, and read a book inspired by a movie that you have already seen. Or did I say that right? Read a book that inspired a movie that you've already seen. There you go. And I saw the movie The Hate You Give already, but I had not read the book, so I did want to talk about that a little. I highly recommend that everyone read this book, even if you have already seen the movie, because I had seen the movie, but this book goes so much more into detail about important topics that weren't able to be adapted on screen, which I understand. You know, they're trying to fit it into an hour and a half movie, so they can't fit everything in, but there were so many great important points that I would have missed if I didn't pick up the book. It follows a girl named Star, and she is kind of balancing between two lives. So she lives in a poor, predominantly Black neighborhood, but she goes to school in like a rich, preppy school basically. And she's trying to basically balance these two worlds and her struggle with that, which I thought was very interesting. The story really centers about her and her friend Khalil. One night they are driving and they get pulled over by a cop, and she witnesses her friend Khalil, who is unarmed, get murdered by the hands of a police officer. And it kind of talks about that and how she tries to find her voice and how to stick up for what she believes in and what she saw, and kind of the struggle she had with finding her voice, and ultimately when she does find her voice, which I thought was a very beautiful story, because a lot of times, you know, you would like to think that you would stand up for injustices if you saw them, but it kind of touched on the point of sometimes, you know, when you are in that situation, it is easier to just sit back in the shadows and not talk about the injustices that you've seen, but really standing up for what is right and using your voice for good. So that is what the story is basically about, without giving too much away, I guess. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful story. It talked about a lot of important topics. It also talked about other minorities as well, which I thought was nice in the book that you didn't really see in the movie. So I would highly suggest that you guys read it. It was just a great, it's a fictional story, but it was very beautifully written, and I did enjoy it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Moving along, the next book that I read, part of the reading rush, was Cersei. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I absolutely loved this book. I didn't know what to expect at all, but I'm so glad that I picked it up and gave it a shot. It is Greek mythology, and it has really inspired me to read more Greek mythology, and I hadn't really read a lot except for when I was in school, and I did enjoy them in school, but I hadn't really given any thought to it beyond that. So this has kind of opened up a whole other kind of like genre, I guess, or types of books that I am interested in reading in the future. So I'm really glad that I took the chance and was able to expand the type of reading that I will want to read and enjoy in the future. So I'm excited. But this story revolves around Cersei, as you can imagine. And Cersei is the daughter of Helios, which is the god of the sun. She is a strange child. She doesn't have the same powers as her family and her fathers, and she's not as beautiful as the other daughters and other goddesses around her. So she really turns to mortals in order to find that love and acceptance from them. And it just kind of is the story of her upbringing and her life. It is very, very interesting, very intriguing. You see a lot of different characters, a lot of other Greek characters, gods and goddesses come into play, and it's just, it really surprised me. I did like it as an audiobook. I don't know if I would prefer it as an audiobook compared to a book, because for this audiobook specifically, I feel like I really had to pay attention to it. It's not one that I could just let play in the background or while I'm doing something else, because I feel like I really needed to pay attention to what was happening, who was talking, you know, like the different gods and goddesses, since I am not too familiar with Greek mythology. That's why I felt like I really had to pay attention. But if you're really into Greek mythology, it may be an easier audiobook for you to listen to. But it definitely makes me interested in wanting to read her other books and other Greek mythology books. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars because it was a great book. I highly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading more books like that. The next book I read as part of the challenge was Harleen. Guys, this book is beautiful. I did show in my vlog like the cover and why I love it, but I will show it here as well. I think this cover is beautiful because it's like this. It's very glossy, sorry. But when you take the cover off, and then I just think that is so beautiful. If you know anything about Harley Quinn, you would understand the cover art. I just thought it was a beautifully written book. The illustrations are just amazing. I feel like this is the Harley Quinn movie we all deserve. Is this right here. I wish they would just make this into a movie because it is the origins of Harley Quinn, like how she became Harley Quinn. So I loved it. It was beautiful. The illustrations were great. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is actually a collection of all 3 because they're 3 different comics. So this was the collection of it, and I'm so glad that I got it because it's truly beautiful keepsake that I'm going to have forever. So if you have any interest in Harley Quinn or the Joker, I would suggest picking up this book because they're one of my favorite villains, and I was just so sad that I have never picked up this book before, and this is definitely one that I will be rereading. The next book I read in the month of August was an audiobook called Sadie. This book was super, super cool, and I highly recommend listening to it specifically on audiobook. That's what was recommended to me, and I'm so happy because the story plays like a podcast. The story revolves around a young girl named Sadie, and her younger sister was murdered, and they are trying to figure out who murdered her, what happened. So Sadie goes off and is basically on a journey to find out and avenge her sister, figure out who killed her, why, and again, seek revenge. It follows Sadie, but it also jumps between Sadie and a podcast. So there's also this podcast where they kind of talk about Sadie and her younger sister and kind of following along Sadie's journey about where she went and finding out what happened to her younger sister. So it kind of plays like a murder mystery podcast. And what I loved about the audiobook so much was it played like a podcast. Like it had the music and welcome to da-da-da-da podcast. Today we're talking, like it just sounded so cool, and it had a lot of ambiance sounds as well as a full cast. So like in the podcast when he was interviewing people, it had the different interviewers like with different voices, and if they were outside during the interview, let's say, you would hear the birds and you would hear people walking and stepping away. Like it just had the cool ambiance sounds that just made it feel so much more authentic, like you were there and in the book, like submerged in it, you know, versus another audiobook where you just have a narrator just talking the entire time. Like there's nothing exciting about it. And I personally love podcasts with full cast. So the fact that it was played like a podcast and it had a full cast and it followed Sadie and you got her point of view too, it was just the coolest thing. So I feel like if you read it as a book, it would still be good, but you would be reading the podcast versus listening to the podcast, which I just think is way cooler. That's what makes the book unique to me. So if you do listen to this book, I would say, or if you do read this book, I would highly recommend the audiobook. You can get it for free from your library using an app like Libby, which is what I did. So yes, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because it was truly great. I loved it. I have no complaints about it. Since there was one part where I was just like, but I'm not going to say because I don't want to give any spoilers. So if you read it, let me know in the comments what you thought about it because I want to talk to someone about it. It was just a great book. I don't know what else to say. It was great. 4 out of 5 stars. Go read it if you can. And finally, but definitely not least, the last book I read in the month of July was Recursion. Guys, this book just, it blew my mind. I don't know what else to say other than it blew my mind. I had read Blake Crouch's other book, Dark Matter, and I loved that book. I had listened to that in audiobook. I believe I gave it like 4.5 stars because, not to be dramatic, but that book changed my life. And so when I saw he had another book, I I knew I had to pick it up because his writing is so unique and so brilliant. And this book did not disappoint. I absolutely loved it. It gave me a book headache because of how back and forth it is, but it gave me a headache in a good way. Like, it made you really think about life, and that's how I feel a 5-star book should do. Like, this is what books are made for. Truly to change your life. There's some books that you read just to have like escape, maybe like a quick cute romance, stuff like that. That's great. But then there's books that come along like this that just change your outlook on life and that lasts with you and stick with you for years, that change your thinking. And that's what this book did for me. So I can't recommend it enough. Check it out if you are into kind of like sci-fi-ish books. So the premise of the story is that the world is in the middle of an epidemic of FMS, which is false memory syndrome. So there's multiple cases going throughout the city of people remembering things that never happened, and they're so vivid that it truly feels like they lived another life, but it never actually happened. Like, for instance, people remember being married and having kids and having this whole other life that never happened. And it kind of feels like deja vu. And the memories are so vivid that it seems so real. Like, they can feel the emotions of it, everything. So I'll just read the back a little. It says, in New York City, Detective Barry Sutton is closing in on the truth. And in a remote laboratory, neuroscientist Helena Smith is unaware that she alone holds the key to this mystery and tools for fighting back. Together, Barry and Helena will have to confront their enemy before they and the world are trapped in a loop of ever-growing chaos. So Barry is basically trying to figure out more about this false memory syndrome, what's going on, and Helena actually has the key to help solve this epidemic that is going on, that is causing chaos throughout the world, and they have to work together to fight it before it destroys the world as we know it. So that's all I'm going to say. It's a very, very interesting read. If anything, it will keep you intrigued and keep you, wanting to flip to the next page just because you're wondering what the heck is going on. So it's definitely a mind twister sci-fi book if that's what you're into. Highly, highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars for me. Loved it. And with that, that completes my July and Reading Rush wrap up. I hope you enjoyed my reviews of them and what I thought. If you read any of those books, please let me know down below what you thought of them, what you rated them, and also what books you read this month, because I'm always looking for new good reads. So with that, I hope you have an amazing day and see you guys next time. Bye!